Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. I am your host, AJ Armstrong. You can follow me on Instagram at AaronArmstrong33, or you can go to my website, AaronJArmstrong.com. Today's guest, as you could tell from the title, needs no introduction at all. General David Petraeus is a former CENTCOM commander, famous for the surge effort in the Iraq War. He is also the former director of the CIA. And then he went on now to be a global partner with KKR, which is a global investment company that manages a large amount of private equity companies as well as real estate. So the reason we ran into General Petraeus was we invited him to be a keynote speaker at one of our events, the Black and Gold Summit out in Colorado. I will warn you right now, there's a huge disclaimer on this episode. The audio quality from General Petraeus is not great. We did our best to try to record his audio coming from the seminar feed, and we couldn't get a good stream at all. It came in the seminar fine, but the audio that you're about to hear is actually picking up off of my lapel mic that was at the seminar. So we did our best in post to try to salvage what we could. It's very difficult to hear, but I will say you can understand what he's saying, and the content of what he's saying is so good that we had to put it out there. I mean, this is just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You get to hear classic leadership examples from such a man of his stature, so we had to get this out there. So today's episode, the first 15 to 20 minutes of the episode is kind of my opening remarks for the Black and Gold Summit, and then we immediately cut to my interview with General Petraeus live. And we ask him some really cool questions about leadership, about the real estate market, and about life. And without any further ado, I want to jump right into this episode, but I just warn you that we did our best to try to make this. So if you have the opportunity to listen to this with subtitles or captions or something like that, it might be a little easier. But you can still hear it if you're in the car. We can still make out the words, but you'll see that there is a little bit of difficulty if you're expecting high quality audio from him, you're not going to get it today, unfortunately. But this is still a fantastic episode. What he says is remarkable. So without any further ado, welcome to the show.
Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews, the only show that's going to teach you how to be somebody.
Where in your life did you learn that you're not good enough?
Take what you're most passionate about and what you're most fearful of, and what is the plan to overcome that fear, and what is the plan to enact that passion.
Let's get this. Here we go. What's up, everybody? Thanks so much. Let's give a huge round of applause for Brian Rodriguez, Lana Rodriguez, throwing this event together. Absolutely outstanding. I'm so excited to be here. Let's give it up for these guys. This is great. Black and Gold working for you. I love it. I hope you guys can get some value out of today's experience. Now, just to reiterate, my name is Aaron Armstrong. If you can't tell by my military grooming standards, I am in fact a civilian now. So and it's actually funny because I went back to St. Lucia when I was there 3 years ago or so. And for those that failed dirt, St. Lucia is an island. It's in the Caribbean, and it's a beautiful vacation destination. I'm on the beach in the Caribbean. I'm sitting there, got my feet in the sand. This local merchant comes up to me. I look about like this, maybe a little bit less groomed than I got an Army-Navy cutoff on, right? So you get the scene. This guy walks over. He goes, hey man, I can get you some of that stinky Bob Marley stuff, huh? And I'm just like, ooh, dude, like, I know I look like this, but I'm not really into that, so that's cool. He's like, I know what you're looking for. How about some crack? I'm just like, dude, I deny the gateway drug and you're gonna escalate me to the advanced level already? It's just like, what kind of vibe am I getting? And anybody that knows me, especially Brian in the back, knows the last thing I need is some uppies right now, because one of the things, I just try to operate like full level all the time. But in all seriousness, guys, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Absolute pleasure to be asked to speak, to the Black and Gold Summits. We've got some incredible guests in this room. One of the things, as Brian mentioned in the intro, I travel the country. I help people with conceptual strategy as well as some personal leadership coaching. And I've worked with law firms, I've worked with private equity companies, real estate firms, and I've worked with individuals from Australia to Ireland. And it's been absolutely remarkable to be immersed into seeing some of the most successful businesses and business leaders in the entire world and what they have to offer. And about 5 years ago or so, I decided to embark on a journey where I would study some of these successful people, study some of these successful businesses, and try to bring together some common threads or themes that they usually have within their business. So I started interviewing these people on a podcast that I started called Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. I also started to read and research, and that's kind of where this research project unfolded. And as I started to interview most of these really successful businesses or business owners, I asked, what's one thing they have in common with their business strategy? Almost every time, they were tied to real estate in one way or another. And that's where I decided, I'm like, I got to start investing and learning about this. I get connected to the West Point network. I get connected to people like you're going to hear on stage today. And I started to learn about the real estate world. And you're going to hear from people today with some tactics, with some strategies of how you can apply real estate principles immediately and start taking action and making some money in whatever kind of avenue of real estate you participate in. But I wanted to go a little deeper than that. I want to know, what is the philosophy that makes real estate successful? I want to go all the way to the root. So I go all the way back, the oldest story I can think of, which is Genesis 1:26, where in the garden, God gives dominion to humankind over the land. This is an interesting thought. One of the oldest stories we have. We get dominion over the land, so we're divinely appointed to take a piece of this property that we see, this piece of this earth that we're all given, right? And now you can see how the centuries and millennia after that unfold. We see the evolution of creatures and humans and how they take up territory, how they take up space, how we hunt and we eat and we farm and we live on this land. And you see that wars happen to hold land. Our infantry folks out there, where we at? We got to have a couple in here, right? Infantry fights to hold the land. This goes back to ancient times. For millennia, we have fought battles over that, right? And that's because that was wealth. Because the land equals life, and the life equals the wealth, and the wealth equaled the power. And that's how that kind of all unfolded. And this is the study I started to figure out as I started putting together, history, 101 or whatever it was at West Point, like Western Civ. I was an American history guy, by the way, so, you can tell where my academics were in line. But the idea was that when you can have these battles over time, the people that had the land had the wealth. And that's why at the fundamental level of philosophy, we see that land will always be real estate. It will always hold real intrinsic value, right? So then flash forward, we got like 1600 ADs, philosopher comes around, named John Locke. John Locke fans in the house, right? One of the most influential Enlightenment thinkers in the American Revolution. And John Locke goes back, cites Genesis and the dominion of land and says, everybody ought to have this, not just some aristocrats, not just some aristocrats in Europe that own some property. They have some land, which means they have wealth, so they can fund an army and they can fight other people for land and pay a tax to the king. He says, no. Everybody's going to get that. Everybody in this country, the United States of America, is entitled to life, liberty, and property. And that's where real estate happened to go through this massive shift. And we started to see the American dream come about. And what better story of the American dream than one of the people who started this event, Lana Rodriguez, right? She comes from the country Latvia, corrupt country, moves into the United States of America. 2011, she becomes a United States citizen, and now she owns one of the largest real estate groups in the state of Colorado. And this is all from her origin story. You see success stories like this always happen in this country. That's why you're going to hear from some incredible speakers. So that's why I just wanted to come out today. Brian asked me to co-host with him from last year. He asked me to help plan in the background a little bit. So if anything that goes right today, that's me. Anything that goes wrong, that's Brian. And that's how we delegate responsibility, So, but I wanted to go through a couple quick ground rules with you guys, So the first ground rule is I encourage everybody, and I haven't seen this yet, but you know how it is with West Point. Sometimes people get chip on their shoulder. That's how it is. Leave the rank, leave the class rank, leave the net worth, leave the status, all at the door. I want everybody here to interact as peers, learning from each other, giving and taking from each other. That's what this is all about, is how we can help grads help each other. We had that, cooperate, graduate thing. Well, why did that stop at graduate? Why can't we compete with Harvard? Why can't we compete with Yale? Why can't we compete with Stanford? Why can't we be this dominant entity of real estate investors or business leaders all throughout the country and come together under one roof right here at the Black and Gold Summit? So leave all that at the door, come in today, treat each other as peers. Second one, everybody can give a little, just a little bit, right? Give a little. We have some incredible investors in this room, people with $100 million assets under management, right? Some people who have done hundreds of millions of dollars in transactions in their life. I mean, this is really, we've got some fantastic investors today. We have some speakers that are donating their fees of 6 figures plus so they can speak to you today. That's happening in this room and online if people can see me, right? That's what's going on at the Black and Gold Summit this year. So give a little bit. It's okay. No matter where you're at, give a little bit. The other rule, though, take a little bit too. All right, take a little bit. Don't be afraid to ask the questions to the VIPs or the speakers or the people that are sitting in here that are like really crushing it. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. We want this to be a seamless, transparent environment where everybody can learn a little bit of something from somebody. Gosh, last year, just a couple gold nuggets I got from Jim Young, just a couple little conversations over drinks turned into some really incredible business opportunities. And that's what we want people to come here in person, defying the odds of COVID, ready to go. Finally, one of the last things I ask you guys to do is to take action, right? And there's a couple stories that one story in particular I want to share with you guys about what it means to take action, what it means to leverage the people around you. You've all heard the saying, you're the 5 people you surround yourself with, or you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. Jim Rohn said this statement, and if you look at the 5 people that are in your circle, you'll have an income with like plus or minus, 20%. You'll have your health will be like plus or minus. If you're hanging out with a bunch of fat people, bad news. You're hanging out with a bunch of lean, mean, hungry, healthy machines, you're gonna be feeling good, right? Does that mean I gotta start, getting on the PT train over here? But here's the thing. If you guys start surrounding yourself with incredible people like the people in this room, you'll start to see that average climb. And that's why we want that give and take environment. Now there's a man that I had the opportunity to meet on my podcast. His name was Nelson Tressler. One of the most inspirational people I got a chance to meet. And in fact, his story started where his mother was 15 years old. She was pregnant, testifying in a courtroom for her father, who was going to be on death row. The reason her father was going to be on death row was because he shot 2 police officers, killing one of them. But the reason he shot one of those 2 police officers is because she was pulled over, she was raped, and she's now pregnant with Nelson Tressler. This is where he started his life, in that kind of environment, with a grandfather that's going to death row and a woman that has some serious traumatic experiences in her life and then defaulted to alcohol abuse and some other abusive relationships that end up abusing both of them physically, verbally, mentally. And Nelson was learning disabled. He was slow in school. All those things that come with a troubled youth. Some child that's been through trauma and abuse. In the 7th grade, he said, how can I myself get out of this? What could I do to get out of this? So the first thing, he talked to a guidance counselor and they said, set a goal. As simple as that, right? Something that seems so easy to us, but just set a goal. His goal, he wanted to be the first person in all of his family line to graduate college. That was his goal. So what did he do? He decided to set that goal. But he realized there's something missing when you set a goal. Sometimes you need that network of people around you, the 5 people that you can surround yourself with to pull you out of it. So he joins the football team, ends up getting into college to play football, leaves college to join the Air Force, beat Air Force, but he comes back from the Air Force on the GI Bill, finishes college, first person to finish college. It doesn't stop there. He goes on to be one of the #1 agents in Las Vegas. He goes on to have a $25 million assets under management. He goes on to start several businesses. One of them is a franchise of children's daycares that he was able to sell off and make a significant amount of money. And he started in that situation I just described. And it's unbelievable because we all go through something. We go through these ups and downs. We go through these cycles. And it's about how do we get out of that? How do we get out of that cycle and grab on to that goal that we set? And one of those ways that he found is to find those people around you. And that's why we're here at the Black and Gold Summit. We're here to find those people that are going to get us to the goals, that are going to allow us to springboard into the future. Whatever those goals are, you got them in your mind. You guys go through this. You guys think about it. What are those goals you have, and who in this room will get you there? There's somebody in this room that did exactly what you're looking to do. Somebody in this room might be connected to the person that's going to get you to where you got to be. This network is so freaking powerful, you have no idea. And we've got people in this room, like I said, we got tens of millions of dollars in the bank account, or they have tens of millions of dollars assets under management, or they might just be fantastic human beings that you're really getting excited to be around, right? That's what this Black and Gold Summit's all about. So the last thing I task everybody to do when they decide to go pick their rank back up and their net worth and they leave the door is to take action on that goal. What is that goal going to be? You got to write that down. You got it in your head. You're going to go out there. You're going to take action with all your might, all your intensity. Let's get out there. Let's take some action and let's roll, baby. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Woo! All right, are we on? Here we go. So our next speaker really needs no introduction. Most of you guys have heard this name because this man has accomplished so many things in his professional career. The short list is really the CENTCOM commander, then director of the CIA, and now.
Sir, can you hear us on the other line over there? How you doing today?
Doing great, thanks.
This is awesome.
Between me and climbing on a stationary bike and cycling around the Swift world.
I'm stopping you from getting that hard body in. I can't do that, But well, guys, well, sir, it's a pleasure to have you. I had to, throw a little disclaimer out there before. My beard, I promise, I was in the military at one point. I'm just very civilianized now. So I hear standing in the presence of a former general, and I'm sitting there like I should be clean shaven and look good, but you know how that goes. But sir, I wanted to just start with asking a little bit about your kind of upbringing. Where'd your story start, and what were you like as a cadet? Because we always look at how I was as a cadet. Centuryman, shout out. But we also want to hear about some of these really successful professionals like yourself and what you were like.
Look, I grew up 50 miles north of New York City in the Hudson River Valley. Drove all of 7 miles around the mountain to go to West Point, having admired folks in my community who were West Point graduates and serving there and all the rest of that. I was pretty serious as a cadet because I was a 3-season Corps Squad athlete, and there wasn't much time to do much else than soccer in the fall, skiing in the winter. That was Corps Squad sport then, and then soccer in the spring. I did well academically, was a star man, and was on the brigade staff as a first team when I graduated. So, I was reasonably serious about it, but we had an awful lot of good times along the way, like all classes do, and there are some enduring friendships and relationships that are very, very important to me all these years later. In fact, last night, 6 of us did a Zoom, which we do every quarter or so, to compare notes. There's some of the more successful members of the class. One is running academic sports right now. Another ran Glaxo Smith and has a whole bunch of his own startups. I should correct you, by the way, I am not the chairman of KKR. I'm the chairman of KKR Global Institute. I would love to be the chairman of KKR, but Henry Kravis and George Roberts.
Look at that humility. Look at that humility. I love it.
For that. It is fantastic to be a partner at KKR, where I've been now for over 7.5 years, and which is more than 3.5 times, I think, any assignment that I ever had in the military anywhere. And it is great to be back with the tribe, and I appreciate the opportunity to really spend a few minutes with you all.
Absolutely. This is really an honor for all of us. I'm really excited to hear all of your crazy stories, I'm sure. And, you have so much professional experience in some of the most challenging times in learning and fighting counterinsurgency for the first time, among many other professional military accomplishments. There had to be some time in your career where you were just completely scared, where you could feel it in your heart and you were just like, wow, this is a lot of uncertainty I'm facing. I don't know if I'm making the right decision. Could you share maybe an experience or a memory that you might have had where you were just really scared and how you overcame that?
Oh, there were plenty of those moments over the years. There were some, on the eve of real combat for the first time. I served in Central America, Haiti, Bosnia, but this was not full-on combat as we were engaged in the fight to Baghdad when I was the commander of the 101st Airborne Division. And we were actually, there were items about the logistics of that gave us great pause. We had 254 helicopters going into battle, and just being able to refuel all of those to establish some refueling and rearming point. Then on the eve of the first real battle, the fight for Najaf, where it was a true 3-brigade closing in on a city. But the truth is that the one that was really, for the highest stakes, if you will, was when I was commanding the surge in Iraq. And I deployed to Iraq again. I'd already spent nearly 2.5 years on the ground at that time. We'd written the counterinsurgency field manual, we'd overhauled everything that our Army and the Marine Corps, with the partnership with Jim Mattis, who was the counterpart in the States, to reshape everything we did to prepare our leaders, units, forces, equipment, everything for Iraq and Afghanistan. But when I took command, I knew that I literally had 6 months before I had to go back to Congress to testify. I had agreed to do that during the confirmation hearing process. And that was staring us in the face every single day. And there were moments where I would sit down with General Mierno, the Big O, as we called him. He was the 3-star operational commander. We had General Crystal and then Admiral Craven as the JSOC commander, some other 3-stars for a variety of the training equipped with, in fact, General Dempsey initially, and then General Dubik. But at the end of the day, as the Big O and I would be sitting there after the morning update and following the small group and then the small group, and then we had the smallest group, which was the two of us staring at each other, asking, when is this going to turn? When do we get demonstrable progress? We believed absolutely in what we did, which was a 180-degree change in our approach from what we've been doing prior to the surge. We've been pulling our forces out of the neighborhoods, consolidating on big bases, handing off tasks to the Iraqis, and preparing to go home. And the violence invalidated all of that, and that awful spiral of violence in Baghdad in particular, where every 24 hours there were 53 civilians dead due to violence. It's just horrific. And I told Congress that we would have to go back into the neighborhoods. The only way to secure the people was to live with them. That they would, the bad guys, the Sunni insurgents, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and the Shia militias supported by Iran would fight us for that, but we had to take back control of these areas, and that violence would go up, that it would get worse before it got better. And it did all of that, although we could see very quickly civilian casualties come down, then suicide bombings come down, and a variety of other indicators. And finally, in the final 11 weeks prior to that testimony, we had 8 weeks out of those 11 in which was a significant downturn in violence.
Wow.
And that enabled us, frankly, Ambassador Crocker and me, to go back and testify to the various committees in the House and the Senate that we were achieving progress, that our approach was indeed advancing the cause, and not to withdraw support. We really faced a situation in the Senate in particular where there were only 1 or 2 votes standing between the policy and some kind of restriction, deauthorization, whatever, for the war in Iraq. Keep in mind that the Senate Majority Leader had said that the war was lost. So this is a fairly desperate situation. And after the very first trip that I went back into the neighborhoods on day 2, taking command of the surge, it was so bad, it was so much worse than I thought it was, even though I've been following this for the whole 15 months I've been back in the States every morning, the daily update that General Casey, my predecessor, received, and so forth. I literally went back, and that night, after everything was done, shut the door, the room where I had a bunk and a whole bunch of computers and communication stuff, and the windows all bricked up, by the way, because it had to take the glass out. And I remember I put my head down on the desk, literally, and was thinking to myself, what in the world have I got into? So, but it did turn. And then ultimately, of course, we drove violence down by some 85% in the course of that 19 months. And I assume that there's some individuals in the audience there that were part of that. And to those who were, I want to say thanks for all that you guys did, turning big ideas at my level into concrete action at your level, outside the wire, under body armor, Kevlar, with a weapon, doing what only you could do, which was to engage the enemy and engage the population. But what you were part of, if you were part of the surge, was something that was very special and that did retrieve an entire country from the brink of civil war and gave it what turned out to be 3.5 more years of good situation before tragically it was undone by a prime minister pursuing highly sectarian political actions.
Wow. Hey, just by a show of hands, was anybody part of that surge? We probably got 10, 15 people in this audience that were a part of that. So let's give a round of applause to everyone that's part of that.
Remember as well that we didn't just ask 12-month tours of those in Army units, we extended them to 15 months because Secretary Gates just couldn't produce, they couldn't generate the forces that we needed. And for what it's worth, that was a 19.5-month tour for me. And of course, then they ended up in Afghanistan a year and a half after that. But that was something really quite extraordinary. And it was a case where we did believe that if we did what we knew we had to do, it would produce results that would be very significant. Afghanistan was a different story because of the enemies being outside our reach in Pakistan and a variety of other factors that just made it very, very difficult. But no, that period in Iraq was very, very, very tough. I'll give you one other quick anecdote. Right at the end of the surge, I think my successor was already back in. In fact, it was General Vieira, who was gone home for about a year and then came back. We'd walk around this big, huge man-made lake in that enormous compound out by Baghdad International Airfield, Camp Victory. It was quite substantial. You could run. There was a 6-mile route around that. And every now and then I'd walk at night, and I just have my chief warrant officer who headed the security detail. We didn't need anybody else. It was secure. All we really needed was just somebody with a radio or a phone, just in case something extreme happened. But I remember that night, again, we're a couple of nights before the change of command, and the chief asked, he said, "Sir, I wonder if I could ask you a question tonight. Don't want to interfere with your thinking," because normally I was literally thinking about the next day and I'd take some notes sometimes. But I said, "Sure, Chief. What is it?" He said, I just wonder what it has been like to command the surge. And he said, we were told that the war had failed. You were accused of having a failing strategy. This is throwing, more troops, into a lost cause. You were criticized heavily in the hearings. You had the Pink Ladies. You had MoveOn.org taking out full-page ads in the New York Times against you. Again, there was no shortage of folks casting aspersions on the strategy, the policy, and even on me. And he said, "I just wonder what it's been like. The thing has succeeded now. Even your worst critics have finally conceded that this actually worked. And it'll put the new president in a wholly different situation from what he would have had 19 months ago." And I said, Chief, this has been the most awesome experience on a good day. But there have been less than this many good days during our 19.5 months together this time. And by the way, he did 3 more combat tours with me. So 2 more. So, it was that kind of endeavor. And by the way, I suspect that there are some in the audience in the real estate sector who feel that they are encountering something that was about as desperate as we did going into the surge. Because that entire sector has been turned upside down. Areas that, where everyone was trying to sell all of a sudden have become hot. Connecticut, where you couldn't drive down any street in a nice neighborhood without for sale signs lining it. All of a sudden people are buying there. And the much sought after high-end real estate in New York City, where I had an apartment, I've actually given it up because we're moving over to Hudson Yards, the newest, biggest real estate development in America. That is looking somewhat questionable at this point in time. We own the top 10 floors of the tallest building. We're going there. It's spectacular. It will eventually all come back. But the challenge is, how long will it take this to turn? It's the same question that the Big O and I would ask ourselves after the morning update a couple of days each week. And that has to be weighing on a lot of folks there. So, for those who say, well, it's not life and death, well, I don't know. I mean, it could be somebody's entire livelihood, life savings, and all the rest of that. And we feel that very much, in the world that I'm in now as a partner in a major investment firm, way beyond private equity, because of course we do real estate, we do real assets, real estate, energy, and infrastructure, in addition to the normal private equity industries, and we're all around the world. I remember someone said, it's not as serious as what you did. And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, this is people's pension funds. This is their life savings. So this is a very serious moment. And I'm sure, again, that there are folks in that audience who are wrestling with the same kinds of challenges that we were absolutely wrestling with in the first 4, 6, 8 months of the surge.
Yeah.
And there was still always that threat, even at the end, that things could go south.
Yeah, it really is a remarkable story. And one thing you mentioned in there was the idea that sometimes things do get worse before they get better. And for the people that might be experiencing, whether it's a turn in a cycle or it might be some rough thing going on in your personal life or personal business, it's the idea of having that trust that the work that has been done, the hay that's in the barn, will come to fruition at some point, much like your story kind of illustrated.
No, there's no question about it. And, the truth is that the mark of a person, a leader, whatever, isn't how they handle victory or success or winning.
Right.
It's how you handle the non-high five moments in life. And, hopefully you don't create them for yourself. But I remember somebody wrote me after I left government, and it was my former deputy from the first 8 months in Iraq, British officer, former SAS officer, brilliant guy. And Sir Graham Lamb wrote me and he said, don't tell me how high the guy jumped, tell me how high he jumped back after he got knocked down. And that really is the measure, I think, of the individual, of the firm, of the organization, of the leader. And again, you don't want to create those for yourself to see how well you do. But it's always against, after any challenging period or any mistake, any setback, any shortcut, obviously all you can do is sit down and determine, okay, what happened, why it happened, how did it happen, what do we learn from it? And then at a certain point, make amends where you need to and all the rest of that. But at a certain point, you got to put the rucksack back on and start putting your right foot in front of your left foot again and moving forward. But this is going to be a tough time. How we work, how we live, how we play, how we congregate. So many of these how we have been upended by the pandemic. And it's going to be with us for some time. And I do think that one of the big ideas is that the new normal is not necessarily going to be the old normal. I think there will be some lasting changes out of this, and some of them, by the way, in the real estate space. I don't know, for example, that every firm is going to want to have a big high rise in New York City the way that used to be the market merit for a great financial firm or many of the other industries of America, the great banks and all the rest. I don't know that we're not going to continue to do what might be termed hybrid conferences in the future. As someone who used to travel, just do crazy travel. I mean, I would go to 25 countries a year and every major city in the U.S. many, many times. But think about what we were doing, and I look at that now and I say, it really is, what were we thinking? And, I did a conference this morning in Mumbai. Went great. I did one with Abu Dhabi at lunch. I'm doing one with you guys wherever I can.
Traveling man over here.
And I haven't left my library, and I got to walk the dog a couple of times in between. And I met my wife tonight after hopping on the bike downstairs and spending an hour and a half in the world in Swift, which, by the way, we've invested in. This is this digital cycling world for serious cyclists. But
Brian, you hear that?
I think there will be changes, and the question is, of course, in what way? How do you define that? And then, of course, how do you capitalize on it? And can you beat the other folks to it? And how much risk are you willing to take?
Right. Well, you mentioned, you've got tons of experiences with some of these top leaders and individuals. And I'm curious, what is that one characteristic that you think you could pinpoint of a winner, of somebody that just always gets it done, somebody always comes out on top? What is that one thing that you think is one of the most valuable characteristics in a leader facing adversity and success?
It's really hard to pinpoint one, because if someone asked me, and I used to get asked a lot, what was it you looked for in, say, the 3-star operational commander in Iraq? You have the entire army, and the chief says, anybody you want. And the quality that you're looking for, first and foremost, I mean, they would say, do you want a guy who can run with you? And I'd say, goodness, no. Number one, that's hard to find, but number two, what we really want, we need somebody who has incredible operational judgment. And it really, at the end of the day, if you think about it, that is really what does matter most. Now, you want, along with that, obviously resilience, stamina, interpersonal skills, character, all these other intangibles that we always list. But in my experience, what set apart those you really want in the toughest of times, it is those who can look at something and say, that's what we need to be 3 months from now. Now let's figure out how do we get there. So this is this operational judgment. And I can talk very quickly about strategic leadership, and that's the leadership of a firm itself.
Sure.
The founder of a startup all the way on up to the commander of the surge in Iraq. You have 4 tasks, and the first is the most important. That's to get the big ideas right. That's the strategy. And so I explained that the strategy for the surge that mattered most was the surge of ideas, not the surge of forces. 25,000 additional forces with the same strategy wouldn't have produced the kind of results that we achieved. It was that we changed what it was that we were doing. We also, by the way, did reconciliation. We also pursued the irreconcilable even more intensively and all the rest of this. But you've got to get the big ideas right. Then you have to communicate them through the breadth and depth of the firm. Some of those who were there will remember I put out a letter the very first day to the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines of the multinational force of Iraq and so forth. Counterinsurgency guidance, all of this, just endless repetitive communication. And then, of course, overseeing the implementation of the big ideas. That's, your battle rhythm, how you spend your time. It's the metrics you follow, ringing them out to make sure they're really, you can absolutely live with those numbers and die with those numbers. You really believe them. You can put it out to Congress and so forth. It's hiring, it's firing, it's inspiring, it's energy, it's example, it's all of these things. And then there's a fourth task that is often overlooked, which is how do you refine the big ideas? How do we need to do that? And then do it again and again and again. You can do this with Netflix. Reed Hastings is one of the great strategic leaders of all time. Jeff Bezos, Jack Ma, even though his IPO is on hold for right now, et cetera. But I mean, think of Netflix as 4 reinventions that he's done. I've talked to him about this intellectual construct, which I've laid out, by the way, if anybody wants to look at it, at Harvard, at the Belfer Center website. I was a fellow there for 6 years when we built this whole strategic leadership intellectual framework. But Netflix, it started out, we're going to get movies in the hands of customers without brick and mortar, put Blockbuster out of business. That's the big idea, communicated overseas down here. How are we doing? Great. Blockbuster's going out of business. What do we do next? Well, broadband is fast enough. Let's have people download movies. That's how we'll put them in their hands. That goes great. But each time, of course, everybody starts to do what Netflix is doing. So they have to do something new. The third reinvention is to create their own content. This is $100 million on House of Cards alone, and Breaking Bad and all these others. And then the fourth was when they went out and decided they were going to make big movie productions, buy a couple of big movie studios. And the first one was that terrible one with Brad Pitt playing General McChrystal. That's a humor. It's not really march around like a little wooden soldier the way Brad Pitt did. So I obviously was devastated that Brad Pitt didn't hold out to play me. But you get the idea. And so, you ask me what's most important, get the big ideas right. If you don't do that, I don't care how charismatic, how energetic, how determined, stamina, all these other phenomenal qualities and values and attributes. If you don't have the big ideas right, everything you are doing is building on a shaky intellectual foundation. So it comes back, in a sense, to judgment. To get those big ideas right and to decide between the different recommendations and different courses of action, which one to take.
I like that. And judgment's interesting for me, and it kind of goes into one of my questions for you was, you've got this balance that you often see with leaders is that there's the leaders that really like to analyze information, right? And then you have the others that are really action oriented. And one of the missions here at the Black Gold is how we can get people to take action in real estate. But sometimes if you're not looking at enough information, you might not get the big idea right, or you might be misinformed, and therefore you might judge poorly. And I understand that, maybe that's a little bit more of an art than a science, but I'm curious, if it was a science, what do you think is that balance between?
Well, I think it's both.
Okay.
I don't think you could ever get the mathematical model that just plops out the answer that, you should or shouldn't invest. I mean, there's always, especially if it's competitive, you're going to be at the edge of where it is you're comfortable taking action. And the truth is that that's operational judgment. Certainly you want to have the skill in gathering the facts, you want to have the experience, the expertise, the numbers, the projections, all of this in as much detail as you can gather. But of course, you're never going to have perfect information. It's just like the battlefield. At a certain point in time, you have to make a decision. And you remember the old adage of, a good plan delivered well in advance at the 85 or 90% mark is vastly better than the 100% plan delivered 10 minutes before you're supposed to cross the line of departure. So there is that art piece to this. And, you've got to be really careful about certain adages. I worked for a great boss. The best mentor I ever had was General Jack Gelman. I was his aide as a 2-star, speech right away as a 4-star in Southern Command, and then joined him also when he was the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe for his first year over there. He pulled me out of West Point. And And he always used to jokingly say, Dave, the bold move is the right move, unless it's the wrong move. That's the challenge with this. So again, it does come down to a degree. And if you had perfect information, there wouldn't be any.
Who needs leaders, right?
Competition.
Right.
In a sense. I mean, everybody has good teams. So this is always about, again, how much risk, how do you mitigate the risks? I mean, what I do for KKR, most importantly, is identify geopolitical risks, security challenges, integrate the macroeconomic factors and the environmental, social, and governance issues. And then we figure out how to mitigate those risks. You do your first deal in Africa, which again, I played a huge role in. Our first deal in Mexico, I originated actually with MX. And you figure out how do we reduce the risk in every case, because it's there. The first deals we did in the Philippines, deals in the Balkans. Gosh, I had to visit those countries, some of them 4 times to get them to actually obey their own laws. And another case, it took all of 15 minutes. That I said, I only want to see one guy who's run Montenegro for 30 years. He's still running it, even though he's not the prime minister or whatever. Just him, 15 minutes into dinner, he says, General, I cannot imagine not being able to solve your problem. I mean, I almost got up and walked out. I said, fantastic, that's it, all we do. But again, that's what we do. And even in some developed countries where then we own a company, and all of a sudden, for example, a solar company in Japan where they changed the offtake agreement after we actually made the deal and invalidated the investment thesis. And no one else could actually get the government to recognize that this was not what you do to a company that's put $3 billion in equity into your country. Because we're far and away the biggest investor of our type in Asia, way, way far away. So, we've got roughly $240-ish billion invested, or assets under management. And it's about to jump, as publicly known, with an acquisition probably over 300 in the early part of next year. So again, but this is always about how do you reduce the risks, but that's in every aspect, of course. We're also trying to do that in terms of, what technology breakthroughs could invalidate your investment. So again, right now, if you're looking at real estate, again, trying to divine in certain markets, when are people going to return to offices? How long will they renew their leases? Of course, the commercial real estate often has pretty long leases, so some of those have done pretty well. I mean, there are certain areas that I think it is going to take a while to sort out. I mean, if you're in high-end real estate in New York, which was already on the verge of being overbuilt, an awful lot of folks thought, and there's a mansion tax now, and there's obviously the downturn, everybody is fleeing to the Hamptons or Connecticut or north of the city or what have you. That's a tough place to be, and there's going to be a real shakeout in that area. So again, how do you de-risk this? And those are the challenges there.
Yeah. I want to learn, shift gears a little bit and just learn a little bit more about, you're probably the most productive person I've had the opportunity to run into. And I'm just curious, what are some of your success habits? What are some of the things that you do maybe daily that you just absolutely rely on and swear by, that if everybody else took this into their life, it would significantly improve their quality of being and production and productivity levels?
Well, again, you've got to have a battle rhythm in a sense. We certainly don't call it that anymore. And you've got to use that time as efficiently and everything. And so, but I get time almost every day. If I don't, I'm very cross. But every day for a good workout. But I'll tie it into other stuff. You can certainly listen to things while working out. You're not going to get a serious workout while having a great conversation or a Zoom call. But I actually do a lot of walking of the dog while listening to calls or podcasts or it's about using that time as efficiently as you possibly can. I think what did make a difference over the years was a technique that might be termed public goal declaration. And this is where you commit to someone that you are going to do something, and you do it publicly. And I'll give you a couple of examples of this. When I was in the staff college, I told the staff group leader, he's the guy that does your evaluation report and so forth. And he asked us to lay out our goals, and one of my goals was to run a marathon in well under three hours. And so I put that down. I declared it. I wrote it, and people saw it. And you then have to do it. And I cursed myself for that on all these long training runs, all the rest of that. But by golly, you get really serious about that. And I ran it 2:50:50. I did it actually years later after breaking my pelvis. It was a free fall accident, and a year and a half later, in the early 50s, ran the Army 10-miler as the commander of the 101st, actually before deploying in 63, 40 or something like that, which again it was the slowest I'd ever run a 10-miler, but I hadn't run one in a number of years especially since breaking my pelvis. When I went to grad school, it was to teach at West Point in the social sciences department. And I told my future boss at West Point that I was, the 2 years that I was going to be at Princeton, that I was not just going to do the master's degree, that I was also going to do all the coursework, all the general exams, the oral exam, the language exam, and there's a couple of other requirements, plus the dissertation prospectus approval process, and you actually have an oral about that as well before you start writing seriously. And I was going to do all that in that 2 years that I was there, and then while I was at West Point, I would do the dissertation itself, finish it. And again, that was an enormous lift because the course overloads were horrendous because the master's didn't naturally feed in. The master's was a bit more of a professional policy maker. It was a cross of international relations and economics, but very utilitarian stuff, whereas the PhD is a traditional academic theory, political philosophy, and economic theory degree with a lot of heavy-duty macro, micro, and international econ. And so again, that was one where I really questioned myself. There was ultimately a course conflict. I had to bet the entire enterprise on taking the advanced graduate macroeconomic exam, having never attended a class, and get an A- or better. Now I'd work like a dog with all the lecture notes and all the homework and everything else, but still to roll in there, you had again to get an A- or better to get credit for it if you didn't attend any of the classes, and managed to pull that out. But again, that forced me. Once everybody sort of knew, I couldn't imagine showing up and not having done what it was that I said I would do. And I think those are valuable. Those kinds of commitments, when you make them, your family, the public, your bosses, and everybody else. So you got to be really judicious about doing it. Don't get carried away. Definitely don't do it after having 2 or more beers. Otherwise, I think that's a pretty good way to ramp up your productivity. And you can do that in a variety of different ways, obviously, and some more modest than others.
Yeah, I think those are 2 wonderful ideas. You got the idea of PT, working out, staying in shape. That only helps you think clear, it helps you feel better, and it helps you operate at such a high level.
And, we did it even in combat because I couldn't sleep otherwise. I mean, you got so much stuff going on. And you are tired. You're at the edge of your actual physical existence, but you're sort of mentally drained. You're not necessarily physically worn out quite the way you get if you have a great workout, especially if you run at 110 degrees in Baghdad in the afternoon with a 25 knot wind blowing sand in your face for the full training value.
I love it. I love it. Sir, you know what? We got time for about one more question, and just, you know, we got a room full of grads, all various levels of success in finance and real estate. You know, what's some advice you would give to this room today, looking back on your career, looking back at the people you've met and some of your opportunities? What is that gold nugget you could leave for the group today?
Well, there's probably a couple. You know, one of them does have to do with treating people right. And I'm talking everybody. I'm talking the doorman at the hotel where I had an apartment for, 7.5 years and really got to know them and would give them tips at different times and just show them that, I actually recognize their existence where, man, most folks are just blowing by them or sort of dismissive. And I think that's just pretty important with everybody. And just recognizing that everybody deserves, again, to be treated with dignity and respect and, until proves otherwise, perhaps, in some cases. But that's actually a pretty big deal. And I really do still try to practice that in daily life. The other one, though, is something I actually wish I'd known maybe really early on. And this sounds sort of trite, but it's actually pretty profound. And that is that life is a competitive endeavor. And you might as well embrace it and get on with it and compete. Now, knowing that you're competing not always just to be the best individual, but to be the best team player in the world as well. But again, you don't get a t-shirt or a trophy, as everybody there knows, just for showing up in the real world. And I think sometimes we should pass this on to our kids sooner than we sometimes do. I think, there's this, again, everybody did get a trophy on our son's soccer team. They certainly didn't win the championship. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have, it shouldn't be fun and nice and everything else, but you do have to sort of recognize at a certain point in time that, again, people reward those who produce the best results. And the sooner you embrace that, I think the better it is. And there's sort of a revelation for me, actually, in the first year of West Point that, I can compete with these other folks, and I need to, and we need to, but try to still be a great team player. I mean, one of the awards I was proudest of, I was number one in my Ranger School class, but I was actually more proud of and that was the Darby Award. I think there was a so-called Merrill for Honor Award, which you got actually from your peer ratings. And they said, it's fairly rare that somebody actually comes in number one and also gets the peer ratings. And again, that was something that I was very proud of. When we were doing the fight to Baghdad, the great 101st Airborne Division, with that famous phrase of, rendezvous with destiny, and I've given this heroic radio call, guidons, this is Eagle 6, onboard Desert Eagle 2 is now in effect. The 101st Airborne Division's next rendezvous with destiny is north to Baghdad. Godspeed, air assault out. And, all we wanted to do was the air assault on the Baghdad International Airport, and that would be the air assault into history for us. And the 82nd Airborne was sitting down at the airfields, literally with their air items already drawn, the parachutes, everything else rigged up. They wanted to jump on Baghdad International Airport. But then at a certain point, I realized, the unit that really should do this, it is the 3rd Infantry Division mechanized. They're to our front. And what we should do to enable this overall effort is we should actually take up the missions of follow and support and maybe even combat support. We had 72 Apache attack helicopters, and we put them out in front of 3ID and cleared the Carvalho Gap and all these other places just vacuumed up the desert floor of long-range artillery and air defense units and a number of ground armored elements as well, to the extent that we could. They still had horrendously tough fighting, and the unit that did that Thunder Run was extraordinary. But we then also decided we need to be clearing the cities their bypass. Give up this stuff about Baghdad International Airport. They should do that. They're the best trained, equipped, ready for it. We need to clear our supply lines. There's some big fights that entail the big cities. But, the division commander, Martin 6, 3ID's commander, called up, said, "Hey, Eagle 6, I wonder if you could do something for us." I said, "Sure." He said, "Do you have any 155 ammunition, artillery ammunition that you can spare?" And I said, "Hey, not only do we have ammunition that we can spare, we will give you the entire unit because that's the quickest way to get it to you." They literally go black on 155 howitzer ammo. And then he said, "By the way, can you also spare an infantry battalion?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I gave him the battalion that I had commanded, in fact, which would also have to do the first air assault for the division, needless to say. But I mean, that's the so you got to compete again, be the best team player at a certain point in time, and not for any great sense of reward or whatever. It's just because it's the right thing to do. But by God, we also competed to be the best that we could absolutely be as well. I mean, I'm still replaying the time that the battalion in the 101st that I was privileged to command only came in second in the Chile cook-off. So there's Fort Campbell. So, you gotta have, I'm not talking about just sort of, going through the motions. I'm talking about being fiercely competitive. And I think that is what, at the end of the day, and especially if you can do it while seeming not to be fiercely competitive, that's what is rewarded at the end of the day. And I'd like to think that, along with some other God-given talents, that I had a degree of sort of work ethic and all the rest of this. And like we said, trying to make the most out of the opportunities, and resources, and the time, and all the rest of that. The other one is, let me offer one last one, and that is because, a lot of folks will say, "Hey, Petraeus, is the luckiest guy in the world," and I was, in a lot of ways. But, because, something's going seriously south, that's when you actually want to take command, assuming you can turn it around.
Right.
But the truth is that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And I had literally spent, my entire professional life studying, reading, participating. I didn't go to the war college. I went to a fellowship instead. And part of the reason was I wanted to go to Haiti. I knew that was going to happen, and I thought I could get out of the fellowship easier than I could the war college. It was always, you've got to be preparing, and that was an international assignment, by the way. I was the UN, the United Nations Force Chief of Operations, not a U.S. hat, not dual-hatted either. And again, that has made a lot of difference over the years, but it is truly to be prepared for when that moment, that timing, that luck arrives. Because again, luck is what happens when that preparation that you've done your whole life meets opportunity. And again, I hope that for everybody who's there, who have already done so much for our country, and for each other along the way, and for their soldiers and so forth, and sailors, airmen, Marines, that each of them will encounter the kind of opportunity that I had, and that their preparation can prove equal to the moment, and they also can be lucky.
Awesome. Well, sir, I do think we have a gift for you. We're going to figure out a way to send it to you. Don't you worry. But we'd like to present you with this plaque that we're giving our speakers today. And as you the keynote today, I don't know if the camera can zoom in on that, if we can get them, but we're going to figure out a way to get this. We're going to figure out a way to get this to you. But ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking General David Petraeus.
Good job, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.